breaking barriers and bridging the gaps between patients and doctors. Welcome to Brainstorming with the Docs and your co-hosts, Dr. Glenn Harrison and Dr. Kolby Condos.
All right, everyone. Welcome back to this week's episode of Brainstorming with the Docs. I'm Dr. Kolby Condos, my good friend and co-host, Dr. Glenn Harrison. What's going on, bud?
I'm doing well. How are you? How's your evening this
It's good. Evening? It's good, man. I am sick of the cold and I am sick of the snow because it's been like one and then the other, which is like, from what I understand, like classic Minnesota weather, like snows 15 inches and then it's 20 degrees below zero for a week.
Yeah, and then they call Colorado colorful. I think Minnesota's colorful, but just different shades of white.
Yeah,
right?
Just like all white and then brown and then some more white where they like spread some salt on the roads and it throws it back over the dirt. So
that was like I was in Canada, and you know, we hit minus 37, minus 40 Fahrenheit. So it was, we'll just say minus 40 Celsius, around the same, if not exact. And, drive 18 hours back to Colorado, and I don't know what it was. And I still can't convert Celsius to Fahrenheit, but it was, it was plus 10 here Celsius. So that's, I don't know what that is. I don't know, 50, 40, something like that. Like swing over just in 18 hours. So, and fires. Yeah. And fires.
Oh yeah. You told me about that. There was a fire really close to your house.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I got all these text messages before I left Canada bright early at 4 a.m. or 3 a.m. asking if my house was okay. And I was like, yeah,
why wouldn't it be?
Why wouldn't it be? Where did it go? And yeah, there was fires right, I should say evacuations 5 minutes away, 5-minute walk away. So
that's crazy.
Yeah,
in the wintertime too. That's nuts.
Mm-hmm, it was. Yeah, so talking about extreme things, we're going to talk about something extreme in the neck.
Yeah. We're talking about the goiter. If this is your first time listening and you have a goiter, well, enjoy. Otherwise, if you get value out of this information, please hit like and subscribe, turn on notifications, because we're going to continue to roll topics out like this as often as we can, once a week. And we're going to go as long till the wheels come off. So
that's right.
Share this information with anyone you feel might get value out of it. And yeah, here we go. Let's talk about goiters. Okay.
So what is it? What is a goiter?
So it's an irregular growth or enlargement of the thyroid gland.
Mm-hmm. And usually it's pretty obvious, right? A goiter, you look at yourself or someone else and they'll be asymmetrical. So one side is usually going to be more enlarged than the other side. It'll be prominent. And, it's interesting. I see chiropractors because they're looking at your neck. They'll catch it. I'll see hairdressers. A lot of hairdressers catching goiters in their clients. But what are the causes? Sometimes it's just a nodule. So it's one part of it. Sometimes it's the whole lobe of the thyroid, the whole part of the thyroid enlarging. Iodine deficiencies, we'll talk a little bit about that. I know we're going to beat that up. And sometimes it can be infections, really, and swelling, like autoimmune disorders of enlarging the thyroid, or at least part of it. And then there's all the abundance of thyroid diseases and disorders that we see and work with every day.
Yeah, then it can just be pathology of the thyroid, right?
Yeah.
Also, before we get too deep into this, I'd like to thank my family member for this idea. I'm not going to say it out loud, but you know who you are.
Yeah,
you asked me, you do one on goiter? I was like, yeah, we'll do one. So this
goes out to some family members, a family member.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Well, that's good. We can help out who we can. So, classically, goiters were the result, historically, I should say, were the result of iodine deficiencies. And the interesting thing was, as the populations moved off the coast, moved in the interior of the continent, there was less iodine in their diet, and people started this deficiency created significant goiters. Now, I don't know what the percentage of goiters were back then, but I think it was rampant.
Well, I mean, you even look at some of this, like historical paintings, like even during the Renaissance, you can look at some of those paintings and you look at their neck and you're like, wow. If this was if this is historically accurate, that lady has got a massive goiter, and you can see it in all sorts of paintings.
I did not know that. That's interesting. There's a history lesson. Look at you learn everything on brainstorming.
There you go. If you're looking at like a Da Vinci or something, and this lady's got a massive neck, it's probably not that she She was swallowing something, right? Yeah. She probably has a mass there.
She wasn't exercising her neck muscles.
No.
Yeah. Well, I did not know that. But so iodine deficiency was always a big thing. And they added iodine salt, and then every iodine in the salt, and then everything kind of dissipated. So they're not very common now. But I just saw one 2 days ago. And then 4 days before that, and probably a week before that. So we do.
Well, they still do happen. They're just not as prevalent as they were once.
Yeah. So if someone, if they don't see it in the mirror, I guess usually they would, but if they're questioning it, what would be some symptoms that people would see?
Well, I think you brought up a good point, because I've actually seen this before where they actually had an enlarged thyroid, but it actually wasn't swelling anteriorly. So it wasn't pushing forward. It was actually pushing backward.
So it was internal growth versus pushing out forward, like in the Da Vinci painting.
Yeah. And it wasn't popping straight out. It wasn't slapping you in the face. It was a little more subtle, let's just say. So when you have a goiter that's, swelling posteriorly or towards the esophagus and the trachea, you can have issues with difficulty swallowing. You can have difficulty breathing. You can have changes in your voice. So your voice can get more hoarse, or it can get more airy.
That's actually very common.
Very common. Mm-hmm. Yep. You can have issues with snoring or apnea, choking. So this was one of the key points that pointed at me to believing that this patient had an enlarged thyroid. She's like, I can choke on water. She's like, anything I swallow, I feel like I'm choking on it. So that was kind of thing where I'm like, okay, we need to get some imaging of this. We'll get some lab work of this.
So that's how you found it, was an image.
That was it. Yeah. There was no other complaints of it other than that.
You couldn't palpate anything? Couldn't feel anything?
I palpated it too. That was during my physical exam. And that was one of her main complaints. Like, I'm choking on everything. Yeah. I got this chronic cough where I'm not getting better. When I palpated it, I was like,
I've also had people say that they feel like there's a lump in their throat, and there can be something else, or spasm, or all sorts of interesting things. So don't dismiss these factors. If you're listening to this and you're wondering, well, maybe you just want to understand the causes of a goiter and what you can do about it. Maybe it's obvious that you have it, but don't ignore those symptoms. The swelling of the neck that's symmetrical or asymmetrical, just large on both sides, maybe the paintings you're talking about, or just asymmetrical, only one side. I see that all too often, and sometimes it can create some insecurities, right? So,
right.
Well, I'll have patients, women, but I've had men too, where they would actually wrap like a scarf around, or a light scarf that they would wear. Because it's, they see it. Other people might not see it, or it might be not as obvious.
A little bit self-conscious about it, right?
Of course, naturally. And then I
think you brought up, sorry for interrupting you, but I think you brought up a good point too with this, like, is it one side or the other? Is it symmetrical or asymmetrical? Because then that can give you some insight as well. Because if it's symmetrical, then it might be like a systemic issue. If it's asymmetrical, then you might want to explore things like nodules, or
that's right.
Stuff like that.
Exactly. And a nodule, we like to say it's separate from the thyroid, but the only way it's truly separred if you have someone that's skilled, that's feeling it, or an image. Ideally, the image is the gold standard.
Image, yeah.
Yeah. What do you do if you suspect a goiter?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we just touched on a big part of it, right? So I think that the first place that usually, if they come to my office, obviously I'm doing a physical exam. I have the luxury of comparing their neck versus a lot of other necks, because I obviously look at a lot of necks, being in the profession I am. But having someone palpate it and feel it, if you have someone that does it to a lot of people, they can say with a certain amount of certainty, like, okay, this is what normal feels like. This is what abnormal feels like. This is what I'm feeling. This is what I suspect. This is the route I want to go. I want to order some lab work. I want to order some imaging, because you don't want to just have someone palpate it, go, wow, that doesn't feel normal.
And then that's moving on. Story. Yes, yes, exactly.
Moving on.
Yeah, and thyroid cancer is a real thing, and because of its location, you wouldn't want to risk there something that's malignant, a cancer, and it being missed, something simple, because there's so many amazing procedures. Even if you got to remove your thyroid, we both have patients that do remarkable with the thyroid removed. Life, they need to manage it properly, but it's got to be checked. There's another thing about goiters, or I should say nodules. Some interesting information, because I'm working with a lady that has a nodule, and it actually started to come down and down. And it's literally in a few weeks. nodules don't necessarily just disappear. So when I was working with her, I couldn't say, okay, yeah, we've got this, it's going to disappear. Or the medical community was like, well, it's not, they biopsied and everything. It was non-cancerous. So that's a good thing. But there's still the aesthetic part of it, the concern of it. She wasn't ending up with any obstructions or any of that. So I said, well, we can, do what we can. Maybe there's an inflammatory component to it. So we went down that avenue and supplementation, lifestyle, and all these other strategies. And yeah, it started to come down. I don't know how far it's going to go, but I had to let her know about the nodules and the prevalence of them. And I think I shared that with you, Dr. Kolby. At 60 years old, or actually at 50 years old, 50% of the population has at least one thyroid nodule. And it can be very small that you can't see, or it can be large enough to look like a goiter, an enlargement. At 60, it's 60% of people, 70% of the people. So as we age, we're higher risk of these nodules. It doesn't mean we should dismiss that they should be evaluated and watched.
Yeah, definitely investigated, right?
Yeah.
The last thing you want to miss is a cancerous nodule.
Well, that's right. That's exactly right. And there's a lot of that in our world right now for many other reasons. So yeah, do the proper imaging, identify it. And then laboratory tests, that dictates the course of action. Do we just watch it and monitor it, like the lady I'm working with? That was medical management. Just, they weren't worried about cancers. Our avenues are different. We're going to find, well, why was there a nodule? What's happening here? Regardless of age. Did you have something to add?
Well, no, I was going to, and then you covered it.
Oh,
so you're good.
okay.
I took a deep breath to interrupt you. And
yeah, I heard the pause. So yeah, keep breathing, Dr. Kolby, keep breathing. So that, do the imaging and know what's going on. But an interesting thing is iodine deficiencies. There's not too much of it anymore, as you were saying, unless you're at unless
you're in Greenland.
Yeah, the center of Greenland. Because if you're on the coast, you're probably going to get some kind of ocean fish and that you will get iodine. But there's not too many parts of the world right now where you will be severely iodine deficient, creating that goiter because of processed foods and salt and absolutely everything. It's like you can't avoid iodine, which brings me up to something else. If you're listening to this podcast and you have a goiter and you're like, wow, I'll just take iodine, please think twice. A colleague of both of ours, he well-renowned, Datis Karazian, and he said, and he showed all the research and showing, no, the case is closed on iodine, supplementing with iodine, that everything is an iodine problem. There is a chance, but it's a slight chance, and there's a side effect. There's a risk of taking iodine just to take it. You should run labs first. There's some interesting studies, and I know I was trying to regurgitate them prior to our podcast here tonight to make sure I get it right. But, roughly speaking, there was one study out of China. It was well known, where they had three groups of people. They looked in different parts of the country of China, and one group were in an environment where their natural normal diet was extremely iodine deficient. So that's something to remember, no supplementation. And there was a second group that was moderate iodine, in their diet. And then the third group was, significant iodine excess of their diet. So then they evaluated them over a course of time, and and the population had big populations for this. That's why it's such a great study. And the population had the iodine deficient diet. They had drastically the lowest, significantly lower rates of autoimmune thyroid disease like Hashimoto's, lower rates of goiter, lower rates of hyperthyroidism, and lower rates of hypothyroidism. And then you went up to the population that had the most iodine excess in their diet, not supplementation, but just the foods with
just
more iodine
from their diet.
Yeah. And they had the highest rates, like significant. We're talking 50 to 80% more thyroid problems than the deficient. And then there was a study out of South Korea, and they used some supplementation, real mild supplementation. And the population with the highest supplementation of iodine, which is still very, very low relatively to what we can do now with supplementation. The population with the highest iodine supplementation, they not only had more thyroid problems across the board, but higher rates of hyperthyroidism and hypothyroidism. So everything in the thyroid was more problematic with higher rates of iodine, even dietary. So what does this mean? Well, I think it means that we got to be careful with iodine. I haven't had iodine in the clinic for a long time. And after I started reading all this, I was like, no, everything, there's not a drop of iodine, because literally the pin of a head of iodine is less than what I think it's less than a pinch of salt. And that is in excess of iodine. A pinch of salt, table salt, is in excess of iodine from what we see for healthy thyroids. So what is
that? How much salt are you getting that you don't know about?
Yeah. So now when I see people with thyroid problems, first thing I'm doing is, iodine deficient diets. No, at least you're not going to have iodine for sure as a supplement. You're not going to have iodine salt. And then you're going to go that much farther. Is like, what kind of foods are you consuming that have lots of natural iodine? Mm-hmm. And we're going to remove that. The research is concluded on that. So I guess what is the summary of it? And historically, people needed iodine, because then now you have all those paintings with people had goiters. So where's the middle ground? Well, the research is suggesting that iodine requirements is a very tight window. Too little is a problem, and too high is a significant problem. So on the lower end of that window, and in our world, we have excess iodine everywhere. It's kind of hard to avoid it. So there's a little bit of iodine rant. I've talked about this before on another channel. So hopefully it was helpful.
Yeah, I think definitely. I mean, it was definitely insightful. I hope everyone got a lot of value out of that, because that's a lot of education right there condensed into like 8 minutes.
Yeah. And I think if people know anything about goiters, they're like, wow, I better check my iodine levels, because that's what the narrative was for the longest time. But this is the newest research, and it's not Dr. Harris and Dr. Kolby saying it.
It's not holding water. Yeah, it's not just us saying it. Like it's been shown through the literature. So
just, and after all that research came through, I was like, oh my goodness, I was giving patients iodine, but I didn't just give them iodine. I would still do a laboratory test to see if they're on the low end. So unless
I think you just brought up a good point, right? So if you have a goiter, you don't just go out and go, okay, well, I have a goiter, like I have this thing swelling in my neck. I just need to take iodine. No, that's when you need to do an appropriate laboratory analysis. And we're not talking just like TSH and T4. Like you need to do, if you have questions on this, look back to our thyroid podcast, because we outline the tests in there.
3 of them.
Of the stuff that you should be doing. Yeah, it was a 3-part series. We break that thing down hard, right?
We do.
So get a complete lab panel for your thyroid, not just TSH and T4. And then if you notice the swelling period, then you might want to consider doing some imaging. And if you go, and have a physical exam done, if you get someone that tells you, oh, you just have a goiter, all right, see you later, that's not good enough.
No,
it's not good enough.
Because it's way beyond aesthetics. You have to worry about malignancies, cancers. You have to worry about, is your thyroid functioning properly? If it isn't, well, what other damage is going on in your body because your thyroid can't do its job?
Well, and then you're talking about the physiological processes. Imagine like the actual mechanical deformative processes of it too. Like all of a sudden it's pushing on your vocal cords. It's all of a sudden you're not swallowing. You could aspirate something like that. There's a lot of things you need to consider.
Yeah.
So if someone tells you like, oh yeah, you have a thyroid goiter, have a good nice day, then you need to maybe consider finding someone else to analyze your goiter.
But get a painting done ahead of time.
That's right.
Then you can
find yourself a Renaissance man and get a nice portrait done.
Wow. Yes, we'll leave it there.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good ending point. So I hope you guys got value out of this week's episode. Dr. Glenn knocked this one out of the park. If you got good information out of it, please hit like and subscribe, turn on notifications, and share this information with anyone that might have a goiter or has questions on their own health concerns, because we're going to continue to roll these episodes out each and every week. And you never know when we might roll out something that's applicable to you. If you'd like to get a hold of us, we actually have an email associated with the podcast and telecast. It is info@brainstormingwiththedocs.com. You can ask us questions there. You can maybe spitball some topic ideas that you'd like us to cover. We're more than happy to do that as well. You can find a lot of information on our websites. Mine is northlakescheropractic.com. Dr. Glenn's is drgharrison.com. And there's a lot of information on there. So if you guys have any other questions, that's also a good resource for you. And we have a lot of podcasts out. So if you have health concerns, maybe scroll back through and see if there's a topic that we've already done.
That's
Because
right.
there's a lot of them out there.
Yeah, I don't know what number this is. We're in the 90s though, or 100.
Yeah,
or
I mean, we're going to be in the
100.
hundreds probably by the time this one rolls out. So.
Yeah. So anyway, that was great, Dr. Kolby. I appreciate it. And I look forward to the next one.
Sounds good, buddy. Talk to you later.
Bye-bye.